Today, we actually have a very special episode with even more of a special guest. I want to give him a proper introduction because it's pretty lengthy. We have a lot of accomplishments. Our guest today is an American political activist, attorney, and business executive. He currently serves as president of Citizens for Self Governance and Conventions of State Action. He's an active proponent of a convention to propose amendments to the United States Constitution. He was the co-founder of the Tea Party Patriots Group, which is an organization that was founded as part of the Tea Party movement. And in February of 2021, he took over as an interim CEO of the social media platform Parler till May 2021. Our guest today is Mark Meckler. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you. You didn't say the most important part, which is I'm a friend of Shai and Dominique, or friends of your family for a really long time. And it's a really incredible connection to make. So we have a mutual friend, and incredible. Your parents, sounds like they're probably close to my age, roughly. And they've been friends with our mutual friend, Shai and Dominique, for that long. And so we got connected through those people. I get to do a lot of interviews, but this one's special to me because of that connection.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is a very special connection, and it's interesting how we have that connection. Shai is an incredible individual. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I want to get right into it today. We have a couple geopolitical issues that I want to discuss, and then I want to get into some of your accomplishments and your work.
Okay.
So let's go right to Israel, because I was born in Jerusalem, Israel. Israel is a very important region topic for me. And with the horrific attacks and the massacre that took place on October the 7th, I mean, we saw over 1,400 innocent civilians, women, kids, purely targeted and butchered for their religion, for the place that they live in. And this was carried out by Hamas, a terrorist organization that held the people of Gaza now captive ever since that they were elected to govern there in 2007. And since the attack, rightly so, Israel has taken certain actions in order to achieve their stated goal of eliminating Hamas' entire military and political capabilities. So we don't have to go back to these conversations every 2-3 years. So we're hearing a lot of different stories from various different sides. So I wanted to know, Mark, what is your perspective on Israel's response so far?
I would never second guess the Israeli military. I have faith in the IDF and the intelligence agencies. And I want to clarify, when I say I have faith, obviously there were huge intelligence and military failures here, but I have faith in them to do whatever they need to do from here forward to protect Israel as a nation and the Israeli citizenry from this kind of butchery. On a personal level, it sounds funny to say, I just wish it was more, faster, and harder. And I may be a little bit off the reservation here. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the quote unquote Palestinian people. They elected Hamas by a 70% margin. That's a pretty huge margin. When the attacks took place in Israel, there were people celebrating on the streets in Gaza and in the West Bank. And it's now known that it wasn't all militants. It wasn't all trained militants that poured through the fence and slaughtered people that day. There were just regular Gazan citizens that participated. They went in and looted the kibbutzim after the slaughters took place. It was just something that I've never seen in my lifetime, certainly not in Israel at this scale. It's outrageous. It's horrifying. People compare them to the Nazis. I don't think that's sufficiently evil. It's hard to say that there's something more evil than Nazism. I call these folks now, they're the Hamazis. This is the next iteration of Nazi ideology. The Nazis themselves were, to some extent, ashamed of what they were doing. They tried to hide their war crimes. The Hamazis, they're out there filming themselves and broadcasting it for all the world to see, their butchery. So I think this is a next level evil thing that we're seeing break out in Israel. And of course, it has massive geopolitical consequences.
Absolutely. You make a lot of great points. And actually, I want to bring up the statistic that I have that 58% of the people that live in Gaza actually support Hamas. So when you hear that notion that also it wasn't just militants that were committing these horrific crimes, but it was everyday Gazans that just so happened to cross the border with the militants. We also have the head of the United Nations agency now calling for a ceasefire. They're stating that an immediate ceasefire is a matter of life and death for millions. We have congressional Democrats joining them as well. We have these organizations, this very activist organizations like Black Lives Matter, also citing the same thing. What should be the appropriate response to those calling for a ceasefire, especially when they're trying to push Israel towards a ceasefire with a region that is controlled by Hamas and is also supported overwhelmingly, more than half, by the people of the region?
Well, I want to separate some of those for different treatment. And first is the UN. The UN is a pigsty of human swine. It is a disgusting place filled with anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic nations. The vast majority of the nations in there are no friends to freedom or liberty or human rights or dignity, certainly no friends of Jews worldwide. I think that the UN should be defunded. I think they should be removed from the United States of America. All those people, their visas should be removed. They are a terrorist supporting organization. It's important to remember that they have an organization within the UN that supports the quote unquote Palestinian refugees. They have schools for their children that are supported by the UN that teach anti-Semitism, the most virulent form of anti-Semitism you can possibly imagine: hatred, murder, dehumanization. So anything that comes out of the UN, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not legitimate for a humane society. And my position on the UN is we should just do away with it. In regard to organizations like BLM or Queers for Palestine, or I think people struggle to understand those things and where the intersection exists between those things. And I think it's important to listen to what they say. And they all use the same language, whether you're looking at a BLM riot or what you would now call a Hamas march in Brooklyn. They're using language of decolonization. And if you listen to what they mean by decolonization, what they mean is kill white people and steal all the property from white people and dispossess white people. It is a racist ideology, which at its core involves a desire to destroy or decolonize everything that they believe is Western. And they believe that the United States is the greatest sinner in Western civilization and must be destroyed. So that's the commonality between Queers for Palestine or BLM for Palestine. They believe in decolonization. They believe in violence against white people. It's a little bit ironic because you know this better than most. Obviously, having been born in Jerusalem, most people in Israel are not what we in the West would consider white, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's pretty funny because it's said all the time that this is white. Israel's just not a white country from just a skin color basis, right?
Exactly.
I would say Israel is a Western country, and that's what they really hate. They hate the colonializers. And then one step deeper we got to go, which is this idea of colonializers and colonialism. The decolonializers in the Middle East are the Jews. The Jews are the original indigenous people in the Holy Land. They were granted by God a much bigger land deed than they now occupy, or frankly have ever occupied. It was occupied at its peak under King David, but never really reached the edges of the land as designated by God in the Hebrew Bible. And so they have come back to claim their land. They have done so successfully like no people we've ever seen in the history of the earth. And it's been an incredible success in terms of Western civilization, in terms of prosperity, in terms of equality, in terms of human rights. If you're on the left, and this is really important to you, in terms of gay rights, alphabet soup, LGBT, whatever you want to call it, rights, that's the only place in the Middle East where people of different sexual persuasions have any sort of freedom or protections. So by every measure, this has been an incredible success. And now you have evil people carrying Nazi ideology and worse, trying to destroy that successful nation.
I think you wrapped it up perfectly. And that kind of actually leads me to more of a domestic issue that still revolves around this conflict. I mean, immediately after the horrific massacres that took place on October 7th, even before Israel got a chance to respond, we started to see these protests supporting actions taken by Hamas. We started to see statesmen, scholars in the United States come out justifying the butchering of 1,400 civilians. I mean, these protests erupted across major U.S. college campuses, across my own campus, and I can't say that I'm shocked, but they erupted with chants such as "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." How do we get to this point? What would you say are the contributing factors behind so many young people protesting in favor of Hamas, and knowing that a lot of them are more socially liberal? How do they end up defending Hamas and just in general the Hamas culture, if you would say so?
So I would say first is just this general idea of decolonialization that's moved through our universities at every university, frankly, in the country, pretty much. There are a few exceptions, conservative bash, but other than that, pretty much every university in the United States has taken up the cause of decolonialization. A lot of this, and we've seen this. We saw this in reference to China recently, where we realized they have all these Confucius institutes on campuses funded by China, promoting communist ideology. We have the same thing coming out of the Middle East from the Qataris primarily, but also from Saudi Arabia. We've had this for a long time, the Wahhabist form of Islam, and their money has polluted our institutions. They have taken advantage of our tolerance to spread their intolerance. It's easy to do when you have almost infinite money and the resources to spread this ideology. So they make grants to these institutions, and then based on these grants, they spread this evil ideology throughout these institutions. They're very sophisticated in the way they've been doing it, and they've been doing it for decades. And so what we've seen is a generation of students educated in this way. The students rise up and they become part of the professorate and the administration, and that's the situation now on all of these campuses. I'm not sure, David, that these campuses can be saved, to be honest with you. You're right there on a campus, so maybe you could speak to that. But I think it's going to be difficult to root this out, and it's not just anti-Jewish ideology. This is really important that we remember this fight between Israel and in Gaza, between Israel and Hamas, is a fight and a clash between civilizations. It is not limited to Israel, Hamas. It is not limited to Israel in the Middle East. It's not limited to Israel and Islam. This is a clash of worldviews between civilizations, and our civilization, Western civilization, is based on what I would describe as the intersection between Athens and Jerusalem. And we receive our faith and our heart and our beliefs come out of Jerusalem, and that's where we get all of that part of our understanding of human nature. Our laws and our logic and our sciences tend to come from Athens. That intersection creates the Western world. And what you see, this barbarism coming out of the Middle East, represented by Hamas at its most violent pinnacle, is a completely different worldview. You hear leaders of Hamas say openly, and we should listen to them and believe them, we love death like you love life. And we are a culture that celebrates and protects and loves life. And that's the legacy given to us by our faith. It is not the legacy given to the purveyors of Islam by their faith or to the non-Western world. They're willing to sacrifice men, women, and children. They do it openly and happily. They believe in the martyrdom of their people. It's good to die fighting for Allah. That's not what we profess in our view of the world. And so there is, I would say, David, and it's hard to use this word, but there is one good thing to come out of this conflict, which is I hope that it creates a stark vision of the reality of a conflict of worldviews. We are going to have this conflict one way or the other.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I like your term clash of civilizations, because that's exactly what I see that's going on. And I have an interesting poll here that was conducted by Harvard recently that with liberals, over 36% of them of all ages seem to agree that Hamas attack on civilians was justified. And more than 50% of people between 18 and 24 years old also believe that. They believe that the killing of Israeli civilians is somehow justified. So how did we end up in this kind of position where liberals are justifying the killings of innocent Israeli civilians by an organization that is supporting completely anti-liberal views? So how do you think we kind of ended up with here?
Yeah, I think a lot of money behind a lot of decades of indoctrination and sloganeering. It's really easy to say equivocate, right? The easy position is equivocation. The easy position is to try to sound sophisticated by saying, well, you have to understand, and we have to place things in context, and there's history here, and it's complicated. Here's what I would say about the situation between Israel and Hamas. It is not complicated at all. It's very simple. You have the barbarians versus people who have achieved the pinnacle of Western civilization. That's the fight that we have going on. It's not easy. And it's not easy because it's an age-old fight. It's been going on forever, literally since biblical times, right? I mean, go all the way back to Abraham, and Abraham has Isaac and Ishmael. And so this is literally, and I think people forget this, and this is important. By the way, this is important whether you're a religious person or not. And I am a person of faith, but whether you are or not, the Bible gives us the history of the beginnings of the Jews and Islam, and there was a schism from the very beginning. And so I think this is something that people should understand, that it goes back millennia. It didn't start in 1948 with the creation of Israel. It started millennia ago, and it's going to continue. And again, it is a clash of civilization. So I think that idea has been around forever. Jew hatred has been around forever, and it has been allowed to fester inside American institutions through the infusion of capital from the Middle East. But again, that capital is feeding what has always existed in the world, almost everywhere in the world, which is an underlying vein of Jew hatred, which runs through society through all of time.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's what baffles me actually a lot, is that I see that those who claim to be liberal are somehow supporting these barbarians that oppose every single bit of what it actually means to be liberal, or to believe in liberal values that we have enshrined in our Constitution, and so on and so on. So that actually takes me to an interesting point, that we live in a very interesting era, I would say, where information seems to travel through social media like never before. We have access to information that can not only inform an individual of something, but could also be used as a tool to kind of incite violence. I see that all over all these social media platforms now, where there's essentially not just people organizing to protest, but now they're also putting addresses out or putting places of worship out and saying, go target these places. As a former CEO of a social media platform, Parler, what can social media platforms do to ensure the safety of religious groups throughout this time without violating the First Amendment, this kind of fine line, if you would say so?
Yeah, and I had to deal with that a lot as the CEO of a social media company. And frankly, it was, people may not remember when Parler got taken down, they claimed that there was a bunch of Nazi speech on Parler. I looked at more Nazi postings than I could possibly imagine or describe to you. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of them. The first thing that I would say about that kind of stuff, and this was kind of something I came to from reading all this stuff, is mostly I think we should allow that stuff. And I say that as a free speech advocate, but also because as you read this stuff, what you realize is these people are the very best advertisement for what idiots they are, what morons they are, what barbarians they are. And when you read the majority of things that they post, they're not sophisticated. It's not nuanced stuff that is going to convince regular people that maybe they should be Nazis, or in this case, Hamazis, right? It's really just hideous blood libel kind of stuff. And so I would argue that when we allow people to speak, generally speaking, they will discredit themselves if they have discreditable ideas. Where it crosses the line and where the struggle is, and I say the struggle in controlling it, I don't mean the struggle in deciding, is when you advocate actual violence against people, and then when you take steps to allow that violence to take place. When you're dealing with doxing, as it's commonly known, which is identifying people along with their addresses and phone numbers, allowing people to actually go after them and threaten them, that crosses a line that we as a civil society cannot allow. And those are places that I think social media has the ability and the need to crack down upon, to not allow that kind of stuff. But look, I think if people want to express their support for Hamas, that we should allow them to do so openly. And I think we should be, it may not be the right term, but welcoming to that. And here's why I say that, David. I want to know if somebody supports Hamas. And I hope that they post it. And I hope that they post the Palestinian flag on their webpage after this barbarian slaughter, because I want to know that that's somebody I need to stay away from. I want to know that nobody should ever hire this person. People are complaining because there are quote unquote cancellations taking place of some of these folks, some of their job offers. Students are losing job offers at prestigious law firms. I think that's excellent. And I am actually, it sounds funny, but I am, as a conservative and a classical liberal in my views, I'm a huge fan of cancel culture. And but cancel culture, the question is, what are we canceling somebody for? Right? So if you say, I love Hitler, well, you should be canceled for that, because that opinion shouldn't be welcome in a modern multicultural society. That's not acceptable discourse in modern society. People should lose their jobs. So amazingly, we have now a reporter at the New York Times that's very pro-Hitler, that's been rehired as a pro-Hitler reporter to cover this conflict, which is astounding. But we should support that stuff being openly said, and then we should support what I call societal shame. I think, David, one of the problems facing our society and what liberals have done to us that's so evil, and God tells us in the Bible that this will happen, that evil will become good and good will become evil. So you have liberals shaming people for the things that are good: hard work, living a religious life, fidelity to your spouse and your family, patriotism to your country. Things that were once considered honorable are now considered shameful, and things that were once shameful, things like bizarre sexuality, things like saying children should have their genitals cut off. These would have been shameful things 15, 20 years ago. Now those are good. And so I'm a big believer in societal shame. We just have to have the right targets and the right standards.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a great answer to that question, because you're absolutely right. We shouldn't not allow these individuals to post and to express their opinion, because then we don't know who actually is thinking what, and we're able to better judge like that. And if Harvard organizations and Yale organizations want to put out a list supporting the attacks against civilians in Israel, then let it be, because then I also see Bill Ackman come out and say, hey, we want all the names of these individuals who signed on to this, so we can make sure we never hire them again. So I think you're absolutely correct. And I also think that if you don't allow these people to express their opinions, as barbarian as they may be, then I believe that they will go and form other places where they can share this opinion with others who are just repeating the same thing to them. And I could perhaps see a bunch of radicalization from there. So very good point there. And I appreciate you answering the geopolitical question of the week for us. Like, that's